Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
Why don't you wait until July 1st to make an announcement? What a disgrace. He can rack up all these numbers in October, November, and December, but what really counts is let me see this in January.
The sports rebel without a pause, delivering fast-paced, jam-packed sports talk like no other.
Listen, I gotta call it as I see it. He is not a good player. I'm sick and tired of having to deal with the disappointment of this franchise. When does it stop? And yes, another winter that I can sleep in peace. Coming correct, directed in full effect. Let's get it.
This is the JAYREELZ podcast. Welcome aboard.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. The month of March has arrived, and therefore the latest podcast coming at you as we can start to see the madness and the sports world starting to rise a little bit as we come out of these doldrums with the Sports Dead Zone Part 1. As this is the JAYREELZ podcast with JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And even though we're slowly but surely coming out of that slow period, that post-Super Bowl right before the March Madness, which begins, I get it, in essence, 2 weeks from tomorrow night with the first four, the playing games, and then in earnest, just 3 days after that. But between now and then, we still have to go through a bit of a slog with the fall and winter sports, and even with some of the spring and summer sports. Really, the one in particular is baseball. But all that I'll touch on later, and even some NFL news, which I'll get to. But I want to start off, and this could be a little bit of a dangerous avenue for me to go down. Dangerous because I'm trying to come up with some interesting themes when it comes to the NBA and NHL. And I'm going to start off with what's happening on the hardwood in the association as I lace up my high tops. And for my beloved Boston Celtics, as I talked about in October during the NBA preview, I thought to myself, this Celtic team without Jayson Tatum, they had to release or trade, I should say, both Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis because they couldn't get into the second apron. Obviously, they want to pay just luxury tax bills through the nose, and therefore had to pretty much adjust on the fly to put forth a good team, maybe not championship team of 2 years ago, but a team that I thought going in was going to be right around 500, or maybe even a team that's just going to be in the playing tournament and maybe throw the dice and try to push a few chips to the middle of the table to see whether or not the Celtics could have any type of, not necessarily run, but maybe even just a modicum of success come postseason. And what we've seen here over the first 60 games, and therefore I got to pose the question. As I pull this up, where's the mouse? Are the Boston Celtics a bona fide title contender this year? Now, I'm going to answer that question in a matter of moments, but not in my wildest imaginations. With everything that I just detailed, no Tatum, had to ship Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis out, had to make this team on the fly, trade for Anthony Simons, who came in that Drew Holiday deal. Then they flipped him for Nikola Vucevic, who I thought was a very shrewd move made by the GM and Vice President of Basketball Operations, Brad Stevens. And for them to have the record that they have after 60 games, where I thought their high watermark this year was 42 wins. If you would have told me 42 and 40 at the beginning of the year, I said, I'd take it. And that's probably going to be what? A 7th or 8th seed in the Eastern Conference? But right now, as of today, they are a 2 seed. And are 2 wins away from matching what I thought would be their record as far as their win total of 2025-26. I mean, who would have thought? Now, you've had performances by Jaylen Brown, who's been worth every red cent ever since he signed that 5-year, $304 million contract. He's in the MVP discussion for sure this year. Will he get it? I don't think he will, but he'll be among the top 5, I would think, when it's all said and done. And at best, I'm sure he'll be second team All-NBA, because first team, I get it. Giannis is probably not going to be there considering the injuries. I'm sure there are a couple other players off the top of my head that I can't even think of. Now, SGA is a guard, so I know he's a couple of games away from not being qualified to make any postseason awards when it comes to the association. But let's be frank here. He's pretty much been anything and everything that you could ever imagine if you're a Celtic fan. Not only since he signed that deal, but look at this year. Him being a leader, a facilitator, a scorer, a defender. I mean, the guy is arguably right now the best two-way player in the sport. And then Peyton Pritchard coming off the bench, who started a lot of games for the Celtics this year. He has taken his next game and his shooting to another level. When you look at just even the game last night, and I won't go too crazy. I'll take it with a grain of salt only because Joel Embiid, and I understand he's the walking wounded, but without Embiid in the lineup, Neemias Queta had career highs in points and rebounds, 27 and 17, and they win over the Sixers. And since the All-Star break, they are 5-1. And their only loss came from a back-to-back after winning in Phoenix the night before, losing in Denver in a high altitude there in the Mile High City. But is this team a title contender? Meaning that can they compete for a championship? Now, I said to you 2 Thursdays ago, there were 5 teams that can, not will, 5 teams I thought that can win the championship. That being the Pistons, the Knicks, the Thunder, Spurs, and Nuggets. Now, I'm not going to put the Celtics in that mix just yet. So to answer your question, or to answer my question, are they title contenders? Now, I'm going to be stupid to say that they aren't, but will they be in the finals? Will they compete for a championship? Obviously, they're going to compete, but will they be among the final 2 teams left standing? I don't know. And I'm going to go as far as saying no for these 2 reasons. One, their supporting cast, although very good, and they play within the system, and I know the coach, Joe Mazzulla, has had a year unlike any other. For him to put the onus on Jaylen Brown and Derek White, who's not had a big year, let's face it, but they've come together, they've bought in, and they've played well above anybody's expectations. But can they do this for 3 rounds to get to an NBA final? This is just to get to, where they're going to need to have the performances of Neemias Queta, where I understand in the NBA, those players perform better at home than they do on the road. Because can you even think that Neemias Queta has that in him in a pivotal game 4 if they're down 2-1, or let's say a game 6 on the road where they may be up 3-2, but that they want to put the hammer down on a series, especially in a conference semifinal or conference final? I can't answer that. And I'd have to say no, because we haven't seen the consistency from these players that are going to be capable of having those type of performances in those spots. And the regular season is great. Obviously, this is what you build to get to the playoffs. But we all know the playoffs are a different beast. Teams are going to be focused and channeled on trying to slow you down or stop you once you get into the postseason, and adjustments are made, and they'll know a certain player's weaknesses, the spots that they like to get to on the floor, etc. So that's why I don't think, number one, that they are a championship, a bona fide championship contender. And then the second one is the question that a lot of NBA fans, and maybe even the good to great sports fan, wants to have answered between now and I'm going to say April 1st. Is Jayson Tatum coming back? Is he a guy that's going to be a part of this lineup here over this final stretch of the regular season? And Obviously, I don't know that. It's certainly trending that way to the point where Tatum looks like he could make his return some point of the regular season. But I have to say that if Tatum does come back, and I have to target April 1st, because if I look at their schedule, I believe they'll have 4 games where the season concludes on April 12th. And I don't know if that's going to be enough time for him to get into game shape, for him to not only shake off the rust, but also you got to shake out the snakes in your head, because he could practice 5-on-5 now, and he could cut and move and have good enough fluidity that all systems go. He's ready to play. He's ready to go at it. But there's nothing like game speed, contact, sharp cuts, all of that. It's not like he could be a wide receiver and could be a decoy out in the court. If you're on that court with your teammates and the other 5 players of the opposition, you're literally naked. You just can't stand at the three-point line and chuck threes all day. You got to go back to defend. You got to run up and down the court. You got to attack the basket. It's not like you could just have a wide receiver that could just kind of take plays off and use that particular player as, like I mentioned, a decoy. So to me, I would think it would be imperative for him to come back if he's ready. And I've said this time after time. For him to come back, let's say by March 15th to the 20th, where he could have 8, maybe 10 games under his belt and then go into the postseason, I think that would be a plus. Anything less than that, especially if he comes back April 1st where he's just going to have a handful of games, I don't think it's enough. You mean to tell me that teams aren't going to key in on him? Teams aren't going to try to rattle him and try to get him off his game? And not just from a physical standpoint, but psychologically and maybe even spiritually as well. And especially if he's going to go up against the Miami Heat in the first round or Orlando. You saw how physical Orlando was in the first round last year. So, yeah, it's a very risky, and also I'll say it, it's also dangerous to bring him back sooner than expected. And let's say even if he does get cleared by the medical staff and he's ready to go, fine. But we all know there's a mental hurdle coming back from an injury like that. That until you go through a whole calendar year and get yourself back on the court, let's say come September training camp, and I'm sure you would still have the psychological threshold and the boundaries that he has to get past. But come on. This is why I don't think the Celtics, and I'm not saying this as a reverse jinx or to be like, oh, you're not higher in your team. No, I'm just being real. Would it be great for Tatum to come back if he's 100% and he's even close to what he once was? Absolutely. And if he's anything close, if he's 80% Jayson Tatum and he plays in the final X amount of games of the regular season and he goes in the postseason, he's like, I got all the confidence in the world, I'm ready, then I'd have to put him in the title contender discussion. Now, I understand because of their record and what they've done to this point, fantastic. But this will be a whole different beast come playoff time. Whether they play the Knicks in the second round, if they do get past the first round, or the Pistons, where they were 1-3 against them in the regular season. And I understand that doesn't mean much. Think back to last year where the Celtics were 4-0 against the Knicks. And I get it that the Celtics outshot themselves in those first 2 games and shot themselves in the foot. And that's why they lost the series. I mean, it's called as we see it. But they still lost. But I think the Celtics, despite them trending north and them just being wildly understated and certainly have overachieved to the nth degree. But I don't know if this team is ready to get to a final and win the whole thing. I don't think so. That's not to say they can't, but remember what I said here about their role players, guys coming off the bench, etc. And I understand the coaching job, Joe Mazzulla, but there's a lot there, people. And quite frankly, against the Pistons, the Thunder, the Spurs. I think it's a tall order, even with the way they played so far in these first 60 games of the season. So that's my Celtic take. Now, as far as the NBA overall on a whole, I know the Spurs had an 11-game winning streak, speaking of them, snapped yesterday at the Garden where the Knicks defense just rose to the occasion. And I was doing my live stream yesterday, my anniversary live stream, 8 years for the podcast. So I didn't watch the game. I was following it here on the laptop. And Mikal Bridges had a big game for him. As we all know, he's a guy that they traded 4 number 1 picks, really 5, but 4 unprotected number 1 picks. And he's a guy that can't even make an all-star team. And we all know he's a better version of a glue guy than he is, but he's not a number 2 or number 3. He's really much like the number 4 guy on the team. After Brunson, Karl-Anthony Towns, you could even argue OG Anunoby ahead of him as far as the pecking order when it comes to scoring. So, but kudos to the Knicks as they stay right there neck and neck with the Celtics in the East. Now, I think the Pistons are safe. They're going to get the 1 seed when it's all said and done. But it'll be interesting to see how the 2 seed is going to fare because that team, by chalk, they will host 2 home playoff series back-to-back. And we saw that last year with the Knicks and Celtics. So I would think that maybe the Knicks would want to try to wrestle the home court away from them. And we know the Cavs are not too far behind as far as the standings go. And I'll even pull up the standings right now just to take a peek. Yeah, the Cavs are 2 and a loss behind, a game and a half behind the Knicks there. And same for the Knicks, 2 behind in the loss, game and a half behind the Celtics. And the Celtics are 5.5 behind the Pistons and 6 back overall in the loss. But the way the East is shaping up, you would think it should be top heavy with those 4 teams. Now, I'm not going to talk about here on March 2nd that, could Toronto, Philly, Orlando, Miami. I understand the Hawks and you have the Hornets who have played better here as of late. And the Bucks had 2 terrible losses over the weekend. And who knows when Giannis is coming back. So who knows if even the Bucks make a threat unless Giannis does come back and maybe they have a late charge. But to me, the East is way top heavy. Unlike the West, where yesterday the T-Wolves with a big win in Denver. And Denver, after their win over Boston, they lose to SGA and the Thunder on Friday. And that was a very hotly contested game with Jalen Williams, the other Jalen Williams, with Jaylin, getting into the face of Nikola Jokic. And I know SGA throwing a ball at him. And I understand it was intentional. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, buts about it. But it wasn't Larry Bird to Bill Laimbeer, if you remember that in the playoffs many moons ago. But the Nuggets, you're starting to see some, I understand they're not whole, no Aaron Gordon, and not healthy. And I want to see them going into the postseason healthy because I think they'll be a tough out. But the Nuggets stubbing their toes over the last couple of games here, now falling back. They were a 3 seed, and now they're the 5. And I understand those teams are only separated by a game, 2 in the loss if it's Denver to Houston. And Houston lost to Miami the other day. I actually watched a bit of that game where the Heat, they're resourceful, led by their coach, Eric Spoelstra, but we're talking West now. And as far as the West overall, unlike, and again, you could say it's top heavy with OKC, San Antonio, Houston, but you do have those wild cards there. You do have, and Minnesota's in the top 4 now, I get it, but Denver, they're a team that could get to a final led by their MVP. The Lakers, I know defensively, and you've seen here with the way they've played, bizarre. When you have all 3, LeBron, Luka, and Austin Reeves on the floor, it seems like they regress. Now, I understand they're not a good defensive team. And that's going to be the bugaboo going into the playoffs because they could have these stretches where offensively they're great and Luka could put up triple doubles and LeBron, even at 41 years of age, could still be ultra productive. And we know about Austin Reeves and his capability offensively, but we all know come playoff time, it's going to be about defense, making stops, getting critical stops, and who knows if the Lakers are going to have that. But because they had that 3-headed monster, they could certainly be dangerous. Then the Suns, who I understand have not played well as of late, and not that I would expect a lot, and they've been nicked up there with both Dylan Brooks and Devin Booker out of the lineup. Golden State without Steph Curry, and I believe he's out. I saw the next 5 games, but I also was told, thanks to my guy Val out in California, that he may be out for 10 games. Now, I don't think they should sit him out or put him on ice for the remainder of the year because right now they're going to make the postseason. I don't think Memphis or forget about Dallas. There's some separation between them as an 8 seed and the 10 seed. And they currently have a 4-game-and-a-loss over Portland. But I think if you're Golden State, you want to stay. Listen, you'd like to get out of the playing scenario. You'd want to be 6th at least. And currently they're 5 games back on the Lakers. And they got smoked by the Lakers there on Saturday night, as you saw. But if I'm a Warrior fan, if they can't get to 6, I'd want them to be right where they're at, 7 or 8, because at least they have 2 shots to get into the bulk of the tournament, that if they drop to 9 or 10, they could be a one and done. And you know the NBA, Adam Silver, they do not want Steph Curry and the Warriors out. Now, we've seen that in recent years where they've lost in the playing scenario and did not make it into the bulk of the tournament. But for ratings, for people to watch, obviously Steph Curry is a guy that everybody wants to see play, even at 37 years of age. And even with him now, let's face it, he's getting into the twilight of his career. He's not going to play forever. And if they stay in that 7-8, at least you could see him for 2 games. And maybe if they win that game against Phoenix, they'll be a 7 seed. So that's why you want to have him there, because you could see him 1 shot to get into the playoffs or 2 shots to get in, as opposed to the 9-10 where they lose that game. Good night, the lights. So that's where it's a little bit more intriguing in the West than it is for the East. And besides that, NBA, not really percolating too much. I know that now Harden played yesterday in the game here against the Nets. He has that thumb, which I talked about on Thursday. That was my headline going in. But for the Cavs, we talked about them being I don't think they're going to be a championship threat, as I've said. But you got to keep an eye on them to see how they're going to fare here down this final stretch of the season. But besides that, there isn't anything else to really unpack in the association. Let me take a look at the schedule for the early part of the week. Tonight, you have Houston and Washington, Boston and Milwaukee. Excuse me, that's on NBA TV. Your Peacock game is Clippers at Golden State. But again, no Steph Curry. Denver's in Utah. Tomorrow, NBC, San Antonio at Philadelphia, followed by Phoenix at Sacramento. Games in between of note. Detroit at Cleveland, a very good game. And they're going to play San Antonio later this week. Because remember, Detroit actually beat Cleveland on Friday after beating OKC Wednesday. Now, they lost to San Antonio earlier. They're going through the stretch here where they're playing Cleveland twice, OKC twice. I believe they play OKC on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. But you have a situation where the Pistons and Cavs will go at it tomorrow night. Then you have Knicks in Toronto, OKC at Chicago, Memphis, Minnesota, New Orleans at the Lakers. Yeah, and then Wednesday, your ESPN doubleheader is Oklahoma at New York to play the Knicks. That will be a good litmus test for the Knickerbockers. Now, who knows? Oklahoma City, they've been nicked up big time, missing a ton of players. Obviously, SGA's had the issue with his abdominal. No Jalen Williams, Jalen. Chet Holmgren is hurt. You have a bunch of AJ Mitchell. I know I'm missing another one here. So who knows what Thunder team's going to show up there to play Wednesday night at the Garden. Charlotte at Boston. That's a good test for the Hornets. Then you have Atlanta, Milwaukee. That's your nightcap ESPN. then Indiana at the Clippers, and then that'll lead us into Thursday, where we'll, of course, have the podcast then. And we'll talk about the weekend schedule at that time. All right, now let me turn my attention to college basketball because, yes, March is here. And a lot of people, I'm sure, are thirsting for the tournament. As I detailed before, we still got to wait a couple of weeks. Next week, you have the conference tournaments and the bubble teams, who is going to be in, who's going to be out. We'll talk about that 2 weeks from today and break down the brackets in that regard. But college basketball, for the most part, over the weekend, I mean, Duke slaughtered Virginia. No surprise there. Virginia was ranked 11th, and that was an interesting test for them to see where they stack against the Blue Devils, which obviously they didn't stack at all. So you saw that happen there. You also had a tough loss for, as far as an injury sake, LJ Kaysen of the Wolverines, who tore his ACL. And that's, when you start losing guys this late in the year, and understanding ACL, he's not going to be able to come back from that this year. But for the Wolverines, you got to see how they're going to navigate that as they get into this month, and obviously when they get into the tournament. So that's something we'll keep an eye on when it comes to the Wolverines. You also had Arkansas get whacked badly to the point where even John Calipari, he says, "What are you going to do? Stuff happens." But for Florida, who's on the come up here, and I mean that in this regard, we know Florida, defending champ. We know they're a good team, but now they're ranked 7th and they're moving up in the rankings. I talked about this the other day, or really yesterday on the channel, because we would think that the 3-1 seeds right now are locks. Michigan, Duke, Arizona. Who is that 4th number 1 seed as we get to the tournament? And we get it. There's plenty of time between now and then to unpack that. We got to see how these teams are going to perform here over the next 2 weeks. But Florida could be one of those teams that, hey, as the old Simple Minds song from the great movie in the 80s, The Breakfast Club, don't you forget about me. And we shall see whether or not the Gators, led by their head coach Todd Golden, is going to, and that win there by the Gators over Arkansas. Now, Arkansas, listen, are they a top 10 ranked team? No, they're not. Now, they are ranked. Where were they ranked? 20th now? Or maybe somewhere as I scroll. Listen, they were somewhere between 16 and 20. Now, maybe 18 and 22. And I'm not going to go as far as saying that was a statement win, but hey, you're going to take a team like that, a Calipari-led team, and beat the brakes off of them, then you know that it's just a matter of time. And I know the latest rankings will be released later on, I believe today or tomorrow. But you got to wonder who's going to be that last team. I think right now, in my eyes, anything can happen, I know, it has to be Iowa State. Iowa State has been very good all year. I understand that they've had their hiccups. I understand they've had their hiccups. Houston had that stretch where they lost 3 in a row. What are they ranked? 5th now? Yeah, they're ranked 5th. Well, in the coaches poll, they're 4th, and I understand. Big 12 championship, you have those two teams go at it. They may end up getting that final 1 seed. UConn could possibly steal that, especially if they win a Big East tournament. And it also depends on what the Houstons and the Iowa States of the world do. Florida, like I said, they're emerging quickly. I think you're looking at those teams to get that final number 1 spot. But I think right now it would be Iowa State. I think they've been consistent. They played well all year. And, despite the fact that they've had a couple of bad losses, whether it was at Kansas and then BYU not too long ago, where BYU obviously did a number. Now, it's going to be interesting because they're going to play at Arizona tonight, and that's going to go a long way to see whether or not they will be in that discussion. And even if Arizona loses, I still think they'll end up with a 1 seed unless they happen to just unravel here over the next 10 to 12 days. But that's why I see the 1 seeds, bubble teams. I'll get into more of that later next week when a lot of these teams, the one bid league teams, get into the tournament. and get a better look as we get into the deeper part of conference tournament week to where these teams stand. Maybe I'll even touch on that on Monday's podcast. But yeah, that's what you have in college basketball. And I'll be all over it as we get deeper into the month and so on. All right, now let me lace up my skates because I want to turn on to the next thing. And this, I thought, was even more impossible than a Celtic championship run. No, not that title. This one. The New York Islanders. I thought going into this year, them not making big moves, them with Patrick Roy as the head coach, which I actually like to hire, and last year did not make the playoffs. And I thought to myself, how's this team going to win? They don't have not that they need a bona fide superstar, but they do have good players. They have lunch pail players, and they have good goal scorers. They don't have elite goal scorers. And I know Bo Horvat, who got off to a tremendous start, and obviously he's been very good for them this year. And to go along with Matthew Barzal is more of a playmaker, and Anders Lee, the captain, who's been there forever. And yeah, they have the other lunch pail guys, the Emil Heinemans of the world, and they have the backline mainstays of Adam Pelech and Ryan Pulak. And I understand they may be a bit long in the tooth with a lot of injuries with them over the years. And, guys like Anthony Duclair, who've been on a million teams, and Tony DeAngelo. And I get all that. But you have to wonder whether or not the reason why this team has overachieved is the number one overall pick of last year, Matthew Schaefer. Has this guy added a jolt? Has this guy injected energy, hope, whatever it may be, to this organization? I mean, this guy has been, I can't even put it in words. The guy has just been phenomenal. Yesterday scored 2 goals. He had 2 goals against Montreal coming out of the Olympic break. The Islanders are 3-0, and in those 3 games, they've come from behind with multi-goal deficits. They were down 2-0 last night to Florida, and they're a dead team walking. I'll get into them a little bit later on. But they were down 2-0 in the game in 3-2, and then Matthew Schaefer gets a go-ahead goal. Then with an empty net, I might add, the Panthers tie the game. And then with 30 seconds left, Anders Lee, skating into the Panther zone, gets around the defense and slam dunks a shot past Sergei Bobrovsky with 30 seconds to go. And the Islanders win, keep pace with the Penguins, who shut out the Golden Knights there yesterday at home. And this team, I don't know what to say. The team has been, it's unconscionable. I never thought they had it in them, and I don't know. Is it all Matthew Schaefer? He's got 20 goals on the year. He has scored the most goals by defensemen in their rookie season in the history of the sport, where he eclipsed Phil Housley. And Phil Housley, as you recall, was a U.S.-born player, and he goes back in the 80s. Buffalo Sabre defenseman, very good offensive defenseman. But for Schaefer, I mean, this guy's looking like Paul Coffey. I mean, let's face it. He has just been otherworldly. And if he doesn't win the Rookie of the Year, there needs to be an investigation, the Calder Trophy. Now, I'm not going to go as far as saying he could be an MVP. No way. I mean, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, you even want to throw Nikita Kucherov. Those are the 3 guys that were in it last year. Even Macklin Celebrini. He's a guy that if the Sharks make the playoffs, now he's not going to get it, but he could be a top 5 MVP candidate. But as far as the Islanders go, and I hope I'm not jinxing myself, just like I mentioned with the Celtics, watch me extol the brilliance of how my 2 favorite teams have played, and now they'll go the other way. 2 weeks from now, the Celtics have lost 4 or 5. The Islanders are now 1-6-1 in their last 8. Geez. That'll be the case. But those are right now, in my eyes, and I'm not saying that because of my teams, but those to me are the more fascinating storylines because these are two teams that, when you think about it, had no business to be in this discussion, and here we are in the beginning of March. And what's going to be fascinating about the Islanders, because the trade deadline is Friday, are they going to make any reinforcements? Will they roll the dice on bringing in a sniper, another goal scorer, maybe another defenseman? And Ilya Sorokin, the goaltender, he's going to be in discussion for the Vezina Trophy, similar to what he was about 3 years ago when he was one of the top 3 finalists. Leads the league in shutouts. And he's had a very good year. He hasn't had a killer year, not an all-time year, but he's had a very good year. Now, do I think they're a Stanley Cup Final threat? I have to say right now, no, because Carolina's good, Tampa's good. Who knows about the Canadiens and Red Wings? That I have to wait and see. I'm not 100% sold on those two organizations. And even the Penguins. Now the Penguins, Sidney Crosby's been out. I know Chris Letang has come back to the lineup. Evgeny Malkin. Those are their 3 mainstays and they're pillars of their organization. But those guys are on the other side of the mountain. And they're almost at the bottom. Can you expect some last-minute magic out of the Penguins to try to rekindle some of that Stanley Cup juju from a decade ago? You can say yes, but I don't see it. I understand they have other players on the team too. It's not just about those guys. But unless the Islanders make a big deal here over the course of these next few days, where the deadline is what? Friday at 3 o'clock? Yeah, I think it's the 6th, not the 5th. Let me double check that. But I got news for you. The Islanders, could they be in that discussion? I think they could, but I just don't think they are. Not right now. Listen, they have 75 points. They've been remarkable. I can't speak enough about what they've done this year, and especially what Schaefer's done. The guy's just been, please, the front office, the ownership, they're doing handstands over this kid. And I think it's premature to call them a Stanley Cup threat right now. Let me see how this team come the middle of April when the playoffs begin and who they match up against. Then I can tell you. Right now, it's a little too early to tell, and I have to say they're not. So we shall see. But with the NHL, that's pretty much been the big news. Because remember, these teams just came out of the Olympic break as of Wednesday. And the Islanders, because of their 3 wins, all come from behind at Montreal, at Columbus, and then yesterday against the Panthers. I mean, how could they not be the main theme here in the NHL? I understand there may be teams out there that have had big-time winning streaks and have done well. Listen, Carolina, just them. They won 5 in a row, and right now they seem to be clicking to the point where they're going to be a Stanley Cup threat. And I thought they were a Stanley Cup threat going into the season. I just wasn't sold on them as a team based on their talent, excellent, but for them to get over the top. And they got a couple of players on the team, which I think may have catapulted them to a team that can make it to a final this year. But I had to leave with them. And I know the Dallas Stars have played great. They've won now 8 in a row, but even then, they're still 6 points behind Colorado for the 1 seed throughout, not only the Western Conference, but the entire Stanley Cup playoffs. And that's the last thing you want to have, that distinction of being a President Trophy winner. As you know, we've gone through that a million times. But I like what Dallas has done here. Anaheim has actually played well. They've won 5 in a row, and they've even leapfrogged over the Oilers in the Pacific. And when we break down even the wild card scenarios in the East, Tampa 4 points ahead of both Buffalo and Montreal, 5 points ahead of Montreal. And give it up. Buffalo's finally going to make the playoffs unless they start a nosedive here. And you got to give it up. They've been thirsting for a shot just to get in the playoffs. It's been a decade and a half. And then you have Carolina, Pittsburgh, and the Islanders are tied with 75 points. Now they're 7 points behind both Both of them behind Carolina, Pittsburgh and the Islanders, that is. And then your wild card, you have Detroit, Boston, 74 and 71 points, respectively. Then it's Capitals, 69, Columbus, Ottawa, 66, and then Flyers, 65. Now, the Florida Panthers, they have 63 points. They're 8 points behind the final spot. And the Bruins have a game in hand. Is it over for the Florida Panthers? If I say that, watch them go on a run. But I will say this. They are not getting to or winning a Stanley Cup Final this June. That's not going out on a limb, especially where they're at right now in the standings. But how I look at it is that even when they won that cup last year, Game 6 against Edmonton, I said it then. Check those receipts. I said, I'm going to say it right now, right here. They are not going to win a third straight Stanley Cup, which we haven't seen since the Islanders of the 80s. Now, the thing with Florida, their number over under by Vegas was 105.5. I laughed at that. I said, there's no way with the injuries, no Alexander Barkov. Matthew Tkachuk was out until what? Late December, early January. The team's not going to click. Of the last 2 years, they would have won that game against the Islanders. Not this year. And if that doesn't tell you right then and there that this team just doesn't have it in them, now we know about their DNA and their pedigree. I get it. Maybe they could turn their season and make the last 22 games their battleground to get into the postseason. And if they do, will they be dangerous? I would say yes. But I'm not going to automatically think that, nobody wants to play the Panthers, because they are what their record says they are. And even if they go over the next month to the point where they, in essence, run the table and then make it to the postseason, how much gas are they going to have left in the tank? So you got to question that, even with the rings, the hardware, and the championship DNA that they have. And the Maple Leafs, forget it. My guy, Craig Berube, yeah, they're toast. He's going to get fired. And the Rangers in last place. I never thought I'd see that day. And who knows? I'm sure there are going to be a lot of teams asking for their players here down the stretch. And then out west, we talk about Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota. Minnesota just 1 point behind Dallas for that 2 seed, which is important because they get the home ice, as you know. And we talked about Vegas, Anaheim, Edmonton. Wild card is Utah, Seattle, separated by a point. Utah 66, Seattle 65. San Jose 62, but also tied with Nashville and the Kings. And then after that, it falls off considerably. So you have those teams battling it out. And it'll be interesting with the trade deadline. Will Seattle, San Jose, or even Nashville and the Kings, but more so Seattle and San Jose, because San Jose is a young team, a lot of young players. Will they bring in a veteran presence to navigate them through the final stretch of the season and maybe try to get into the postseason? Because I would think they would need some veteran reinforcements in order for them to really go long and far. And I understand they're young, and maybe, I won't even say a year early. Maybe they're 2 years early. Who knows? But it'd be interesting on whether or not they'll be active here over these next few days with the trade deadline. You can say that for Nashville and the Kings, and just like I mentioned about the Islanders. Even the Sabres, why not them? If they bring in a guy that puts the puck in the net, or defenseman, or whomever. But that's pretty much the NHL in a nutshell. I know the Kings fired their coach, Jim Hiller. They replaced him with DJ Smith. That came down yesterday. And I believe, did LA play last night and win that game? Let me take a look at the scores. Now, I know the Kings got whacked by Edmonton a few days ago. No, well, actually, look at that. It was Saturday when they played, and they beat Calgary, and they decided, shut them out, in fact, and they decided to say, Jim Hiller, here's your pink slip. Thanks for the memories. So, with DJ Smith now the coach, let's see what he does for the Kings as they try to jockey, bite, scratch, and claw for a playoff spot. Here are your schedule, or here's your schedule for the next few days. That's pretty much it with the NHL. Let me just double check that. Any injuries? No, that's pretty much it. Oh, Mark Stone left with an injury in the game yesterday against the Penguins, so we'll have to monitor that as we move it along. But here are your games tonight. Detroit at Nashville. Columbus at the Rangers. Philly, Toronto, Dallas, Vancouver. Carolina, Seattle, Colorado. Colorado at LA. Your TNT doubleheader, Florida at New Jersey as they're in town. Tampa at Minnesota. Then you have Pittsburgh at Boston, Vegas at Buffalo, Utah, Washington, Nashville, Columbus, Ottawa, Edmonton. Yeah. Colorado, Anaheim. Montreal, San Jose, not bad. Wednesday, Vegas at Detroit, Toronto at New Jersey, Carolina, Vancouver, New York, Anaheim, Seattle, hosting St. Louis. That's pretty much your NHL for the week. So not much going on there as far as the schedule goes. All right, now let me get in the batter's box as I'll talk a little baseball before I turn my attention to football, and then I'll go through the comments. I see I got 23 of them. So I'll be sure for those who have been in the chat room are hang on a little bit more, people. I'll get to those questions in a minute. So as I turn my attention, do a little Major League Baseball. Really what I have here is just news and notes of what's going on. That's the wrong page there, JAYREELZ, or is that the right page? I'm over here trying to find out where my baseball notes are. You know what? I'll just go freestyle off the top of my head. You had the World Baseball Classic coming. I'll talk more about that on Thursday, but I'm not going to go in depth. I couldn't even tell you the rosters of these teams. I know Aaron Judge is on the American team, but I couldn't tell you who else. Tarek Skubal, as I talked about last week, he's going to pitch a start, but that's it. He just wants to spectate the rest of the way, which to me, that's a joke. But with Major League Baseball, I'm not going to go through any of these records and exhibition. I mean, it's a joke. What? Am I supposed to get crazy that the Yankees are 7-2 and that the Mets so far have been pretty good in spring training? And if I want to zing the Yankee fan, one of those two losses by the Yankees was to the Mets in Steinbrenner Field, I might add. But here are a couple of things that really surprised me over the weekend. One, the St. Louis Cardinals extend their manager, Oliver Marmol, 2 years. Marmol has not really distinguished himself, if you ask me. And I understand the Cardinals have not been good over the last couple of years. And they're rebuilding, trying to find an identity. But listen, I understand Tony La Russa's and Whitey Herzog's do not grow on trees. But even when the Cardinals were in contention, playoff contention, and I get it, he's that new school manager with the analytics. He's going to go by the iPad instead of the eye test and make his decisions based on that more so than his gut. And he imploded the one time in the postseason when they lost to the Phillies in that wild card round where Jose Quintana, I believe, went 5 in the third inning and he took him out. I believe they led 2-0 at the time. And then they got the game tied. And then Brad Halsey came in and spit the bit in the 8th inning. So, yeah, we could talk about all of his misfortunes and his peccadillos, etc. But I was surprised. And I understand they're rebuilding, whatever we'll watch. They come out of the gate 14-36, and he'll be the first guy axed as far as managers getting fired in 2026. Obviously, they know better than me. So who am I to say? But as a fan from afar, because Marmol has been a guy that is, I don't know. I don't want to even say borderline manager. But again, he has not really put himself in a position where, oh, this is a bright young mind. This is a guy that is going to be in that dugout for 10, 15 years. I guess the Cardinals thought otherwise, at least for the next 2, but we'll see. And listen, they're going to have a down year. I couldn't even tell you the guys on their roster off the top of my head. The Lars Nootbaars of the world. And, geez, if I even went through their lineup right now, I know they had the one kid who came up and was hitting the cover off the ball. What's his name? Jordan? I got to look him up now. But anyway, that was one thing that surprised me right out of the gate. The other thing was this kid, Connor Griffin, 19 years old, Pirates, number one prospect in baseball. Now, he's batting, I think, 220, but he's hit 3 bombs so far. And if I'm the Pirates, I get it. They don't want to start his clock early or whatever. Bring him up. Why not? Let him go through the growing pains. Listen, unless he goes 0 for 40 to start the year, then you send him back down. But start his clock. Bring some excitement there to Pittsburgh. You know, you have Paul Skeens there to start. He's an attraction every 5 days. And I get it that they tried to piecemeal their lineup together, whether it's bringing in Marcell Ozuna or Ryan O'Hearn. There's another guy I know I'm missing here that they brought in. All right. Are those guys that are going to move the needle, jump off the page, make the Pirates all of a sudden now a possible wild card contender? Absolutely not. But if you're going to have those guys up and you traded Ke'Bryan Hayes to the Reds last year, your previous third baseman, just bring up Connor Griffin. Maybe the guy gets off to a great start. Maybe he could be your rookie of the year. I get it. He's 19. It's precocious, but still. So just seeing him hit and showing his power, that was a bit of a surprise. And it's good. You want to see those bad teams do well, especially when they have these players, when you know that come after year 6, they're going to be signing with the big boys on the block. And that's why the CBA, December 1st, we need a salary cap. Case closed. The non-surprise is Dodgers don't expect Blake Snell to be ready by opening day. He'll pitch his 15 starts, and as long as he's ready for October, as you saw last October, that's all that matters. Because let's face it, people, with the Dodgers, it is all about what happens from October 1st to whatever, November 2nd or 3rd. That's it. So they could win 105 games and win the NL West by 20 games, or eke in on the last day like the Reds did last year against the Mets as a wild card and be the 6th seed. Doesn't matter. If they're in, that's when the season begins. So what more can I tell you on that? But that's what you have with the baseball. Nothing else that's really going on. Yeah, I know there's a couple of injuries on the Texas Rangers, and the Mets are going to Freddie Peralta is going to be the starter opening day against the Pirates. You know that. So that's what happened with the baseball. And then as I put on my helmet and shoulder pads to get to the NFL, with the quote-unquote new season beginning a week from this Wednesday, there are teams that are already starting to make their cuts or potential cuts. You've seen some transactions. I know that the Jets traded Jermaine Johnson, which I was a little bit surprised by, to the Titans. I thought Johnson was a mainstay on that defensive line and an anchor, but he gets traded to the Titans. I forgot for who. I know it was, I believe, another defensive lineman. So you had that, and you also had the Texans trading for, well, I should say the Texans traded, get this together here, JAYREELZ, Titus Brown, the right tackle, to Cleveland for some reinforcements on the offensive line for either Deshaun Watson or maybe Shedeur Sanders or maybe Dillon Gabriel, who knows. You would think Watson coming off of that Achilles injury, and I believe he's going into the last year of his contract. So you already know this is his do or die, because even though if he has a good year and the Browns don't resign him, he'll go elsewhere and he'll get maybe not the money he's going to get this past go around, $240 million guaranteed. But then you had the Chiefs cutting Jawan Taylor, the right tackle, who I know has been very inconsistent over this past year. So you're going to see a lot of this. Maybe the Vikings trade or cut Aaron Jones or Javon Hargrave. So all this is going to come down the pike, and a lot of this is going to build up to next week, to where Wednesday is going to be a feeding frenzy. And I will be on live next Wednesday, 12 noon, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stuff coming down the wire. So it's almost going to be like an NFL new season live stream. So you definitely want to keep yourself locked on the channel. If you haven't hit subscribe, please do so. I'd really appreciate it. This is true, passionate sports talk. None of this clickbait, rage bait nonsense. I can promise you that. So keep that in mind as we move it along. Yeah, and then the Bengals made a signing there with Dalton Risner to a 1-year deal, the offensive lineman. So they get him in the mix. But that's what you have with the NFL. I'm not wrapped up in the combine stuff with, what's his name, running a 4.240, the kid from Mississippi State. My mouth is dry. No excuses, but yeah, that's why I'm over here pretty much gasping for air. Just want to get his first name. Yeah, Brennan Thompson. So he's got the highlight of the event by running a 4.240. And yeah, I can't get wrapped up in that. I cannot look at guys in a controlled environment. I get it that the vertical leap and the 40 and the bench press, that's all right there on the spot. But if you're a quarterback or a receiver where you have nobody on you, no pass rush, no DB, no cover twos, to me, it doesn't matter. When they get drafted, where they go, and how they perform, training camp into the regular season, not only just in season 1, but season 2 and beyond, that's what you're going to look at. You're not going to look at what these guys do here at the Combine, at least not for me. So that's how I grade it. But other than that, that is your NFL. And is there anything else, news and notes going on before I pivot? Oh, look at this. The Texans acquired David Montgomery from the Lions. Now, I understand Jahmyr Gibbs, yeah, because of his play here over the last 2 years, and of course, come contract time, they can't pay both of these guys. So look at that. Texans get a weapon that's needed. I understand Joe Mixon was out last year, and their backup, I'm trying to think of who it was. He only had a big game. Oh, Woody Marks against the Steelers in that playoff game. I mean, he's not going to cut the mustard. So Montgomery, that's a big pickup. Yeah, you had Nick Chubb there too. But, yeah, wow, that's a surprise. Yeah, it says here in the article, Montgomery was unhappy about his reduced role, engaged in healthy dialogue, etc. No, he'll definitely help the Texans and C.J. Stroud. That goes without saying. So that's a good move there. And what else? Yeah, that'll pretty much do it, my good people, for another episode just about in the books. But let me get to the comments here, as I'll touch on these for a moment. Nancy. I know she's probably long gone by now, but good. Fuqua. What is happening? Hope you're still with us. Val. Happy Monday. First here. Porzingis. Yes, he's on the Warriors. Ruby May. Hey, friend, you stream incredibly, and I love it. That's why I followed you. I'd love to share some ideas to help you improve. Kindly add me on Discord. Ruby Mayo 857. All right. Are you only on Discord? I don't know if you're still with. He's probably gone. I'll look you up. Kai. Nope. You're talking about the Celtics, right? I don't know about hockey. So, hey, listen. I hear you. 100%. I'm just like I said before. Val, on top of it, this was what? 23 minutes ago. Oh, RH is back. No, I am not going there, RH, to answer your question. Heart or feet? Oh, you know the question. You know the answer to that. But here's the thing. Back then, they only went through 2 rounds in the 50s and 60s. Well, late 50s into the 60s. Where the Islanders, they had to go through 4 rounds. That's why they hold the distinction of 19 consecutive playoff series, the most ever by a North American sports team. 19. And do you know that the Warriors could have matched that if they would have beaten the Cavaliers there? And that was the year they were 73-9. They would have matched it, which is nuts. But hard to feed is the 8 consecutive championships, even with the 2 rounds, without question. Actually, it's 3 rounds because you got the 2 rounds in the Eastern playoffs and then the finals. But yeah, 8 in a row is just, it's almost impossible. So I'd have to say that. But 19 consecutive playoff series, that's one that's never going to be matched. RH, what about the Canucks? What about them? Oh, no. When Alberta becomes the 51st state, What impact this has on the Maple Leafs? Well, Alberta's in a different province than Ontario, where the Maple Leafs play. So I don't know. I would have to think it's going to be the entire country as opposed to one province. There are 8, so. Who won a championship first, Edmonton or Houston Oilers? Well, it's going to be Edmonton because there's no such thing as the Houston Oilers, so that was a layup. Texans are trading. Wow, Texans have been wheeling and dealing. Oh, in the Montgomery deal? Okay. Good one, Val. I appreciate that. Roughly the value of 5th-round pick. Nancy, hello to you. I'm sure you're long gone, but thank you for stopping by. I appreciate you. That's actually my blood relative, my cousin, where we got together Saturday night with my Uncle Mark. Shout out to him, Mark Vega. And had a nice time, nice night out. Love you guys. Love you both. Thank you, Mark, for dinner the other night. That was very generous of you. And Nancy, for your company, as always. Jeff Passon. With Omaha Productions. All right, good for him. Yes, Sharks doing well. Bio. Oh, man, greetings. Did you see that basketball player? Yeah, that was Chad Baker-Mazara. I did see that. Now, I don't know too much about why. The only thing I can say is that I hope the kid's okay. Hopefully it's nothing deeper. Hopefully it's nothing more than – and listen, I don't know the complete story. I don't know if it was because he got into a spat with the coach or another player or pressures. I don't know. But I did see that. And, you could just wish him the best. Yeah. I mean, as a matter of fact, let me pull that up just to get a better feel. All right. Forward Chad Baker-Mazara. No longer a member. Following a hard fall after he blocked a shot. All right. Program departure. We provide in UFC's brief statement. All right. Saying that he couldn't go. That's the coach, Eric Musselman. And that he had not spoken to an athletic trainer about the player's health. And Musselman was asked about Baker's potential injury and future status. And, of course, this is what I talked about in my podcast pregame. And Chad Baker-Mazara is 26 years old. Bounced around. 5th stop. San Diego State. Went to Auburn. Yeah, I remember him in Auburn, of course. Excuse me. Yeah. Nothing else was really released as far as his reasoning why he pivoted. But, yeah, you can just only hope the best for the kid. We shall see. All right, any other comments here? Kyler Murray. Oh, is that right? The thing is, I like Kyler Murray, but he's just way too erratic for me. He's that guy that he can scramble, he can run, but he's 5'10". He gets a lot of balls batted down at the line of scrimmage. He can extend plays well, find an open man, but this isn't sandlot or backyard football. And listen, there's no guarantee. Not that you can't expect your quarterback to be 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". Understood, but 5'10" is rough. That's why even a guy like Drew Brees, who I know was 6 feet with heels, but he had that advantage where he always was on his tippy toes trying to throw just to see if he could get that advantage over the line of scrimmage. And then you had this one kid, was it Diego Pavia? I mean, was he 5'9"? Well, I think he's also 5'10". Yeah, like these guys, I don't know if they're going to be able to cut it. Listen, you wish the best for Kyler Murray? I don't want him in Pittsburgh. Sorry, to me. Yeah, I just don't want him. And now he's injury prone, as we've seen. So, yeah, if he's going to be the Vikings, and again, that's J.J. McCarthy. Yeah, McCarthy, I think he's going to be the starter moving forward unless he just implodes. And why have Kyler Murray come off the bench if that's the case? So, yeah. First Sam, and if they get Kyler, what does that say about Jay? Yeah. It's going to say that they don't have 100% confidence in him. And the little that I've seen of McCarthy, I'd have to say the same thing. He has ability, and he's young, and I get it. It's really, last year was really his rookie year. The first year he had to sit out the whole year because I believe he had that shoulder injury. But, yeah. Let's see what he does going into year 2, and then you can get a better idea, a better grasp of what kind of quarterback he's going to be. And I love the coach. Kevin O'Connell is the perfect guy for him. So, I want my QBs be around 6'2". Yeah, you want them tall. You don't want a guy that's Doug Flutie. Oh, excuse me. You don't want a guy that's just going to have his moments. And what I mean by that, he's like, oh, wow, he's played well at his height, blah, blah, blah. No, you want that guy to be consistent. You want him to be efficient. You want him to be a top-flight quarterback. You're not looking for fly-by-night, flash in the pan, comet in the sky. You don't want that. So I feel you on that, Fuqua. A.K. Dash Chips, A.K. Rhoda Penmark, A.K. Everyday Mets, Jonathan Sean Cup, Cow, Bull, Boy, Bull. Rhoda Penmark, that is brilliant. That one, I still can't get over that from yesterday. So, what else you got, people? Anything else? Any other comments? Feel free. Now's your chance to get at me. Of course, we'll reconvene on Wednesday. The latest live stream will come at you 12 noon Eastern time. And also, for those who are following the channel here on YouTube at JAYREELZ, I'm doing a 31 days of live stream. So I already got my 2 days in the books. But on those days where I'm not doing a podcast pregame, a live stream, or a podcast, which will be tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I will be hosting a live stream. Now, no given time. It's going to be random. And, I'll chime in about sports, but it could be about something else, depending on where I'm at, what I'm doing, etc. But just want to throw that out there. So if you are into sports content, like it, love it, got to have it, can't get enough of it, as well as a casual, diehard kook like yours truly, or any fan in between, please, I implore you to hit that subscribe button. This channel is the little engine that could. Independent sports, digital media with nothing but opinions, analysis, complete breakdown on all that's going on in the world of sports. I got you covered when it comes to that. But, I think that'll do it, people. Let me just take a look. I know I just checked a moment ago. And if you do have any comments here, I will be sure to speak up and highlight them on the screen. So we'll see this going once. All right, I think that'll pretty much do it, people. Another episode just about in the books. As always, I thank you from the bottom of my heart kindly for your participation, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the toy department of life, otherwise known as sports. And if you haven't done so, one more time, if you'd like to listen to the podcast, I'm on Apple, Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you listen to. But of course, if you want to get the visual as well as the audio right here on the channel at YouTube, hit that subscribe button. It'll go a long way to increase the visibility of this channel and the podcast with all the others that are out there. And on top of all that, if you want to hit me up with any questions, comments, suggestions, you can do so at the following on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, or JAYREELZ on Facebook. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just a number. Twitch, JAYREELZ1, just a number. The old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals with, again, questions, comments, suggestions, whatever it may be. Because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. In the blood, in the DNA since birth. Talking sports, now well more than 2 years doing this full time. That's right. As I try to blaze a path, carve a trail in this space to be known as not only an informative, knowledgeable, but credible, authentic, with transparency, No clickbait, no rage bait, none of that fluff, artificial sweetener, ingredients that you're going to get from a lot of other channels that are out there. I promise you, that is not the case when it comes to yours truly. I will continue to deliver the pain as long as I'm sitting in front of this microphone and camera to bring you the best sports talk that's out there with nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes live, correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby. And let me see, any other comments? That's it. If that's the case, see you Wednesday, high noon. Until then, enjoy your Monday, your Tuesday, and as always, on the flip.